Hey moms, thought I'd go ahead and make another video today. Continuing with my little experiment of making YouTube videos for the first time ever. I have a podcast that I do weekly and have for several years now, talking about motherhood and um, homeschooling and biblical womanhood. But I wanted to give this a try because I think sometimes we imagine people's lives to be very different than what they really are. We listen to someone on a podcast and we picture this perfect life that they have. And, um, I'm not about displaying all of our imperfections, but I think just more about wanting to see that this is my house. This is where I live. For instance, we just moved in here a couple of months ago, and this particular bedroom doesn't have any pictures on the walls yet because it hasn't been a priority so far. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about this morning was just the comfort and anchoring that daily routine can have. It can almost be like ceremony. Ceremonies serve really great purposes. Like when we have rituals and ceremonies at Christmas time, at birthdays, there's certain things that I know our family does for every birthday or at each holiday. There's certain traditions we have. And those things, they ground us and they help us mark the passage of time. But the same thing holds true for things like simple daily things like making your bed and doing the dishes and feeding the kids breakfast or making a meal, folding laundry. Those routine everyday things can all become very, very grounding and actually give us a certain amount of comfort in the midst of trials. I know that there's times in our lives when we've been walking through so much, and there was something so comforting about making the bed and about, wiping down the bathroom. Those things that I do on the regular that I could do in the midst of a trial that made something feel normal. And so I'm just going to talk to you while I'm working. So making the bed can be one of those things. And I usually make the bed first thing when I get up in the morning. This bed is in a different room in the house. It's not my bedroom. And that's just the first thing that I do in the mornings. And it sort of like sends a message to my body that my day is beginning. And one of the things that I've always enjoyed doing as well is keeping my bedroom neat and tidy. There are times the rest of the house looks like a bomb went off in it. And, of course, eventually we're going to get to that, but we've got to live in our house to a certain degree. But I tried to keep our bedroom a sanctuary. It wasn't, and this isn't for everybody. A lot of people are like, no, we like inviting our kids into our room. And I did invite my kids into my room, but it wasn't a space where they came and brought their toys and played unless I invited them in to do that. Because I felt like there needed to be a space in the house that I could go to, that I could count on for some tidiness and some order. So I tended not to fold the laundry on my bed unless I planned on putting it away immediately. I chose a different place for that. And I realized sometimes we have small houses and we don't have a lot of options. So I totally get that. But folding it and putting it away right away, what motivated me to do that sometimes was that I wanted to keep my room as a place of refuge and a place of order, because personally, I don't do well when there's a lot of things out of order. So if I have a place I can go and sort of regroup and not have too much visual stimulation, that has been super helpful for my mental health. We lived in about a 1,800 square foot home. There were 10 of us living there, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. And it was, obviously our home is a wonderful provision from the Lord, and I saw it as that. But we had winters sometimes that, well, it snowed every winter, but there were some winters where we literally had snow. We couldn't see past the snow because the snow would fall off of our roof and down the sides, and it would build up. And we lived like, one year we were like in a snow berm. And so you really, really start to feel it with 8 kids in the house and homeschooling, and some days it being so cold outside that you really couldn't in good conscience send your kids out there. I sent my kids out in some pretty cold weather because I think it's good for them. But there were times it was just too cold, or the snow was so deep, the little ones would end up getting lost in the snow if I let them go out. So all that to say, it was really important for me to have a space, even if it was small, in our home that I could go to reset. I think that is important for us as moms to recognize our mental health, and God cares about that. God cares about our mental health, but we sometimes have to be creative in the ways that we keep that. Sustain that throughout difficult times and through long winters. And truthfully, just leaning into the Lord and asking Him for wisdom in your particular circumstances is the best advice I can give you. I can throw ideas out there to help sort of spur on creativity, but you know yourself, you know your children, you know your home. And so I would encourage you, if you're struggling in that area right now, to really just lay it before the Lord and ask Him to give you wisdom how to manage your days and your space so that you can think and you can be the mom that He's called you to be. And so I think we have to be creative. We also need to be not too picky, not a perfectionist about it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to work. And I think sometimes we get these ideas in our mind that it has to be a certain standard, and it really doesn't. It just needs to work for you. And again, it may not be perfect, but if it helps, that counts, right? We're not striving for perfection here. We're striving for progress. All right, so what were the other things I was going to share with you today? Well, I have a recipe that I want to share with you. I'll probably share that in a different podcast. I was thinking about snacks and how healthy meals can be challenging, but healthy snacks are really challenging when you've got kids who feel like they're continually hungry all the time. So I'll probably get on here at some point and share a recipe that I love and I used for years. It's a granola bar recipe that's really simple and super healthy, and it's just one that I made up along the way. And this is the thing that I loved about one of the things I loved about homemaking was just the challenge of taking recipes and making them healthier versions of them. And so that was something I just learned over the years, and I've continued to practice that. And so our diet just got better and better and better over the years. One of the things that I did with our kids that I think was really important was I did not allow them to have sugar before noon. So no sugary cereals. We tried to stay away from cold cereal in general because there's a lot of chemicals and different things, even in some of the healthiest ones. And it just gives them a big carb boost in the morning. It doesn't necessarily give them brain food. And so we want to make sure that they're having some good protein in the morning. So our go-to was always, was often eggs. And there are some kids who don't like eggs. And so, and what I found out later is some of those kids actually have somewhat of an allergy or aversion. Their body has an aversion or a sensitivity to those, and that's why they can't stand them. And so in any form, so that was challenging. I have found Costco to have some really good healthy breakfast sausage that's been super helpful, and you can slice that and put it on a piece of whole grain toast if you can do bread. Some people are gluten-free, and you can do your gluten-free toast with that on there. That's a quick thing. You can also, if your kids can do eggs, boiled eggs sliced up on a piece of toast. That's pretty quick and easy. Scrambled eggs. I'm sure you know a lot of this, but I'm just throwing some things out there because audiences can be vast and varied. Some moms are at the very beginning of their journey and just need some ideas for inspiration. So I'm throwing that out there. I liked also to do like a casserole dish. Sometimes I would do this the day before, where I would make like a crustless quiche, or basically it's scrambled eggs. You whip up, maybe like 12 eggs and some milk or milk alternative, and then saute some vegetables. Saute maybe some breakfast sausage, because you can kind of like spread the sausage further if you put it in something. And so I would put that in with so I would saute the veggies, maybe some spinach, some onion. Those tended to be my favorite. Kale, if your kids don't have too much of a fit over that, and they can get used to it. And then so I would take that, season it a little bit with some salt and pepper or some garlic or whatever, put it on the bottom of a 9x13 pan that's greased, and then mix up your eggs and your milk or milk alternative, and salt, pepper, garlic. You can put Italian seasoning in it, and whip that up and pour it into the pan, and then just bake it at 350 for 15 minutes or something. You can even Google like a 9x13 breakfast casserole. You don't have to have bread in it. It can just be eggs and vegetables, and you can just really load up on all of that. I love to make that ahead of time so that when we got up the next morning, breakfast was essentially ready. It's good cold. You can heat it up if you want to, but you can't eat it cold. And so that was a great thing. Breakfast cookies. This is something that we enjoy doing, or breakfast muffins that are loaded with things like nuts and seeds. And sometimes some recipes even use protein powders to give your kids a boost of protein in there if you need something quick. I think one of the best things I ever did was the night before I started to wind down after dinner, I would think about the next morning. What are we having for breakfast? Many years I had kids on breakfast duty, and they had their favorite kind of breakfast. So let's say Brittany was on breakfast duty on Mondays. Well, she likes making oatmeal. So we made sure she had oatmeal and whatever toppings she wanted for that. Sometimes she wanted to throw blueberries in there. Sometimes she wanted to put apples in there. So I'd make sure each kid had the ingredients that they needed for their breakfast or lunch that they were preparing for that day. And they rotated and took turns. And then I always was in charge of dinner. So I would make dinner sometimes by myself, which honestly I enjoyed. It was therapeutic to cook without kids, but sometimes I would have helpers in there chopping things up. Always had kids setting the table and that kind of thing, and clearing and cleaning up afterwards. But knowing the night before what you're having the next day for food is a huge thing. When you've got a family of 10 people that you're feeding 3 times a day, you really want to know what you're having and that you've got the stuff in the house. Plus, we lived about 25 minutes from a grocery store, so I couldn't just hop in the car and go get something. It literally had to be that prepared for every meal. But it was really, it saved money, because when you plan and you have the food in there, you can plan economically, and then you follow through. Then all of a sudden you're not buying impulse items and things like that, because we know that the more we go into the grocery store, more often the more we spend, because we don't just get that one thing that we went into the grocery store for. So that was something that was super helpful for me. I loved, the next morning, if at least the night before I knew what we were having for breakfast the next morning, that was doable, because I could get up the next morning and think immediately about dinner if I needed to, and I could take out the meat that needed to thaw, or if I was going to put something in the crock pot, of course I needed to have that thawed ahead of time. But the thing about crock pots, this is something that I don't know that everybody knows. They have found that many of the crock pots over the years have leached lead. And so you want to be careful about the kind of crock pot that you buy. I can't make a recommendation, but if somebody here has one, put it in the comments. I finally invested in an Instapot that had a terracotta insert rather than aluminum, rather than ceramic. And that's worked really, really well. It's just there's no glaze on it. I think it's the glaze that causes the lead leaching. And so anyway, so I invested in one of those. It's an Instapot, but it's also a crock pot, so I could use it for both. So that was something that was super helpful. But I loved my crock pot over the years. Now, can I just say, I didn't know over those years that crock pots were leaching lead. None of us did. I loved my crock pot. I used it frequently. And then you find out later that it leaches lead, and you're like, oh my gosh, you can feel condemnation, you can feel guilt, you can feel fear and worry. What have I done to my kids all those years? We can't go there, moms. You're going to find out down the road there's things that you did that you thought were healthy that someone's going to tell you, or they're going to find out that it wasn't. It's okay. God is sovereign over our lives. I think this is something we need to really get a grasp on and a grip on as moms. God, there is nothing outside of his control. Nothing touches us that doesn't pass through his loving hands first. And everything he does comes from infinite wisdom and infinite goodness. And so we do not have to fear. Yes, we live in a sinful world. Yes, we live in a broken world. But we don't live here without a God who is in complete control and who is lovingly caring for us. And so we trust him even when we don't understand, okay? But we continue as moms to do the best we can with what we know, okay? Don't drive yourself crazy reading things that are going to make you fearful, things that are going to make you constantly think, I'm not doing enough, it's not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not doing enough. Oh my goodness, do not waste your time and energy on that. Lift it up to the Lord, ask him for wisdom and trust him, and then just enjoy preparing your meals for your family. Thank him while you're chopping up that food and putting it in the pots and pans. And as you're, of course we want to grow in wisdom. Let me just say that. We want to grow in wisdom. The one thing that I did that was super helpful was I really tried not to search for more information. I asked God to bring it to me. If there was something I needed to know, I said, Lord, if there's something I need to know, would you please bring it to me? This helped alleviate the fear and the worry about whether I was doing enough or not. I was like, Lord, you know my limits. You know I'm dust. You know I'm human. You know I have limitations. Please help me. Help me to know if there's anything that we need to change in our diet, if there's anything we need to change in how we're cooking our food, if those are the things, the concerns that are on your mind. Lift it up to the Lord. Ask him to give you wisdom, to show you how to best care for your family, and then walk in it with gratefulness. So, I just love, one of the things I love about homemaking is just being able to make my home a place of refuge. And if we are fearful and worried and stressed all the time, our children are going to feel that. What we want is peace in our home. And I pray for that every day. I ask God, fill our home with your peace and your presence, even with most of the kids gone now. I pray for that. And I prayed for that for years. And people have come into our home countless times for meals, for birthday parties or whatever, for coffee. And they have said to us, your home is just so peaceful. You know what? That's not because my husband and I are such great people and we're just so smart and we've, got everything figured out. It's because we've asked God for his peace and his presence. We've asked him for his grace and mercy, that he would pour it out over us because we know we need it. And so I just want to encourage you today, make your home a place of refuge. Ask the Lord to give you wisdom as to what that looks like. And as you're preparing your meals, pray for your family. Pray that as you're cooking this food, that God would take this and nourish your families, not just physically, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, and then gather around the table and enjoy fellowship with your children, eat your meal as relaxed as you can. I understand when there are little kids at the table, that can be challenging, but do your best to chew your food, to enjoy it, to be thankful for it, to be thankful for the faces around your table. Make that mealtime almost like another ceremony, like I was talking about earlier. Dinner time was a big deal for our family. It was at the same time every night, give or take. Sometimes it was a little later. Usually it wasn't any earlier, but 6 o'clock. And the kids grew up knowing 6 o'clock was dinner time. My husband knew 6 o'clock was dinner time. That's when the food would be on the table, and we would gather together and we would reconnect over a meal. And we made that a priority. We rarely missed dinners together. And I realized there are seasons that we're busy and it doesn't happen. We had seasons when our kids were involved in drama and things like that. But make sure that you go back to it, that it is the rule, not the exception, that you are having a dinner together or a meal together. I know some families have the dad has the schedules, his work schedule isn't conducive to dinner, but breakfast, lunch, something, make it work so that your family is having regular meals together. Even if it's lunch one day and dinner the next day, there's something very special about gathering around the table. That was the place where we had so many conversations. And I would say that much of our discipleship happened around the table, talking about God's word, talking about life and how God's word applied to our lives, and particular specific current situations, current events. My husband, he taught so much in terms of economics, politics, just that whole. Most of our kids learned their economics, their politics, and I want to say their social studies. A lot of their social studies around the table, and that's how my husband taught. That was his participation in the homeschooling. One of the biggest ways that he participated was at the dinner table, engaging our kids in conversations about those things. So these things can all happen organically. It don't have to all be formal. They can be just through conversation and taking advantage of the opportunities that you have when you're together as a family. As your kids bring up topics and as conversations come up, remember those are opportunities to teach our kids to how to know God better, to teach them his principles of his word through those conversations, but to also teach things like politics and economics and social studies and government and things like that. We can do that at the table as well. So I don't want to make this video too long, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. I hope that you were encouraged today. Let me know if this has been an encouragement to you. Invite your friends to subscribe. Don't forget to check out my podcast, the Durenda Wilson podcast. You can find it on my website, durendawilson.com. You can also find it on any of your favorite podcast platforms. So I would invite you to go and listen to that as well, and check out my books, The Unhurried Homeschooler, The 4-Hour School Day, and Unhurried, Grace for a Mom's Heart. Thanks so much for being here. Have a great rest of the day.